Hi, welcome to Lesson 2, Concept Development, Essential for Thematic Planning. Throughout the sequence of lessons, there are points that you will be pondering related to the content that we're talking about. The points to ponder are divided into a couple of sections. One is a preview points to ponder, where these slides have you thinking about things related to the lesson before we actually go through and talk about it. Throughout the lesson, you'll be hearing things from me, but mostly you will be hearing things through video clips, through podcasts, and by reading short articles and short pieces of information about the content. So this is a course where you'll be learning from many, many sources, not just your instructor. If I were you, I would record my responses to the points to ponder that are shown before, during, and after the lesson, so that when you are required to discuss some of these points on the discussion board postings, you will have them at your fingertips. Furthermore, the points to ponder would also be good when you are preparing to take and when you're taking your comprehensive exams. As you will notice on the different slides, there will be links to the videos and to the articles that I just mentioned. I would reread and replay those. They're all basically short. They're not particularly lengthy, and that will help you clarify and review important information, just as if you had a textbook, you would go back and reread parts of your chapters. The following are lesson objectives that will be covered in this lesson. First, you will understand the definition of a concept. Then you will state strategies to use to develop concept learning with your students. You will learn several different ways to represent concepts on various concept maps, and you will review principles of constructivism, yet another approach to teaching. Two educational experts that have contributed to constructivism are John Dewey and Lev Vygotsky. Here are your first points to ponder. First of all, what is a concept? As we go through the rest of this lesson, you will be receiving several different ideas about concepts and what they are and the different types of concepts. Also, we will review definitions and steps for direct instruction that we had talked about in Lesson 1. You will be given a link to read about constructivism and learn about that particular approach to learning. And then you should be considering the differences and similarities between direct instruction and constructivism. How are they the same? How are they different? When would you use one over the other? So these are all things that you should be pondering as you're reading and learning about different concept maps. Have you ever had students use concept maps? And if you have, were they successful? How did you use them? What did your students learn? All of these are things that I want you to think about as you are going through this lesson. This slide contains terms that you must know, and got them right off of the website that's up there for you. So if you wish to explore that further, it's a good idea to click on that website. I asked you in the very first slide, what is a concept anyway? And here are some definitions. Concept is something conceived in the mind. It can be a thought, an idea, a mental representation, image of tangible, concrete objects, and intangible ideas and feelings. Now that's a very general statement of many ways that you can view concepts. The next three bullets, or the next three parts of this slide, show you break down the definition even further. An abstract concept are ideas and feelings, and those are left up to the perception of the individual. concrete concept relates to objects and things that can be touched and seen and smelled, and sort of a multisensory type concept, which makes it far easier for people to understand what it is. A semi-concrete concept, of course, falls between these two. Something that can be demonstrated or shown but cannot be touched, such as actions, color, and position. When planning lessons for your students, you need to recognize and identify the various levels of concepts. Obviously, the concrete concept, such as a concept of a cup, is going to be way easier for your students to understand and grasp than the concept of something abstract, such as the concept of honor or the concept of obligation. So as teachers, when planning your lessons, you're going to have to think about the needs of your students and the objectives that you have as you're teaching various concepts and having them fill out concept maps. Okay, now that you know what a concept is and that you know that they can be concrete or that they can be abstract or somewhere in the middle with the semi-abstract concepts, let's think about some of the strategies that you could use to develop concepts. This list came from Sparkle, the website that's on the top of this slide, and it would be useful for you, if you're helpful to you, if you would click on that and read what they have to say. It comes from Utah State University. First of all, they suggest that you use meaningful activities related to concepts. Let's say we take a simple concrete concept such as a cup. What would be some meaningful activities? Well, one, they might explore through examining various types of cups and explore the attributes of a cup. They could do experiments where they determine which cups hold the most, which cups are easiest to drink from, which cups are easiest to hold, which cups keep your liquids hot longer, etc. You could also do an historical perspective of cups, something kind of archaeological if you wanted to. And of course, you could have students create their own cups out of art. So if you were teaching the concept of cups, those are just some ways where you could use meaningful activities that would help them really understand a lot more about the concept of cups than a simple vocabulary definition. Number two, of course, you want to have activities that are of interest and enjoyable to your students. Number three, attach language to all experiences. There's nothing wrong with giving a definition of a cup or letting students come up with their own definitions as they're exploring the concept. Make sure that they're talking and writing and reading and using rich language all during the exploration of the concept. That gives you a 2-for-1 where you're talking about, where you're truly integrating the curriculum, maybe even a 3 or 4-for-1 if you're building in art, if you're building in social studies, science, and of course language. Number 4, you want to stretch your children's language or your students' language. Build on what they know and then stretch it to those richer, more sophisticated academic words. This is your opportunity, whether you're facilitating or whether you're directly teaching, to help them learn even more vocabulary as they're going through their lesson. You want to work with the children on areas of confusion, and there will be those. And that's where your job as a facilitator would be, is to help them identify misconceptions, to, even if you don't understand why they're confused because it seems simple to you, listen to the child or listen to your student and make sure that you understand what the source of that confusion is. And number 6, you want to generalize the concepts that they've learned about a cup to a variety of other situations. The concept of a cup would be generalized perhaps to utensils in general, but you want them to move beyond the one concept and find ways to connect it to others. As we go more and more into this lesson, you will see how concept maps will help you do that. The next few slides, I think, are some of the most exciting parts of this lesson because they show you multiple ways to have your students organize concepts on different types of graphic organizers. At the top of each of the slides, you will see a website that you can simply click on, and it should take you right to the type of flowchart or type of graphic organizer that you want to use. The first one is a flowchart, just like the one that we have on the cover or the first slide for this lesson. And if you notice, some of the attributes of these, the positive attributes, relate specifically to the strategies that that Sparkle had suggested that you use for your students. So on this one, the flowchart, if you were to connect to that, it will show you a way to represent ideas, and an advantage is showing a relationship between concepts, something we just talked about in that last slides. They call some of the markings on these flowcharts, the little circles, nodes, and the links are called lines. So again, it's just, when you're reading about it, it's just a matter of knowing the right vocabulary. As I mentioned in the preceding slide, these can be found by clicking on the link listed above on your PowerPoint. And these concept maps relate specifically to the Common Core standards, and they relate to the K-5 Common Core writing standards as well as the grades 6 through 12 standards. So it would be very beneficial to you if you were to look at your objectives, your goals based on Common Core before you select one of the concept maps, or more than one. You can use several for a lesson, but before you select concept maps to use with your students. To see these concept maps and to have more direct instructions on how to do them, do click on the link as I had mentioned before. I'm just going to name the ones that are available to you. The spider concept map, the hierarchy concept map are two on this slide that you can read for yourself to see exactly what they are, and then click on that link to get even more information. Here are two more concept maps that you might want to explore. One is the flowchart concept map again, and another one is a systems concept map. The website for both of these is at the top of your slide. Again, I had no idea that there were so many concept maps till I started to explore the internet, but there's something for everybody here. These are some special ones. One is a picture landscape concept maps. Another one's a multi-dimensional 3D concept map. And one is the mandala concept map. And each one of these has specific features, specific ways your students can represent information. And once you go on these, I would copy them off. I would work them myself, make sure you understand what they're used for, how they're used, and that way you can target them directly for the needs of your students. Here's one that you've heard of before, I'm sure. It's a very popular one, the fishbone concept map. There's a little explanation as to its origin, and it's used to teach cause and effect. I'm sure it can be used for other things as well. As I mentioned, all of these concept maps are wonderful pre-writing tools for your students, as well as having them organize information so that they can make sense of it. And you have a couple of links here that you can click on in order to get more information about the fishbone concept map. Here are two more concept maps for you. One is a storyboard concept map. This one is excellent for teaching story grammar to children, for pre-writing, for understanding narratives. And the other one is one that I'm sure you're very familiar with, Venn diagrams, often used to show, compare, and contrast. Both of these, and in fact all of these that you have seen so far, relate very easily to the Common Core standards in the way that they get students to think in the various aspects of language arts. I was able to find 3 different demonstrations of different teachers creating mind maps or concept maps. Kevin Patton, it's an 11-minute, 27-second video, demonstrates how to make that flowchart, and also several other concept maps as well. Tracy Gardner, 9 minutes and 6 seconds, demonstrates making a mind map. And Fred Miller, in only 1 minute and 36 seconds, also demonstrates making a mind map. All of these are interesting for you to see. Watch teachers do it. Go back and read the websites that I had listed for each of the mind maps so that you have a thorough understanding of what they are, and you can make a good selection of those when you're teaching your students. Okay, now that you've seen teachers using concept maps, I'm going to introduce you to even more. As I said, there are so many different ones that are available to you. The next 4 slides contain concept maps by Kay Hawes from the University of Memphis. You should open up the website that she has, and you will get lots more information related to the maps. This process development map is rather interesting because basically you provide a blank map structure for your students and they figure out the text to put in the links. But again, I would definitely click on this link and see exactly how she recommends that you use it. This is yet another concept map for you to use, problem and solution. One of the things that you should be noticing right now is that these maps do require students to think at a high level of thinking. More concept maps. This one is on argument. Argument is definitely specifically listed in your Common Core standards for grades K through 6 through 12. This is something, again, that when you click on the link, you should get a good explanation as to what it is that you would have your students do. Here is another concept map that essentially has students working from a blank slate, something that they could use in pre-writing for a descriptive essay. Yet another map, one on a research topic, and the other one is on the narrative storyline. So you can see that the maps cover a lot of different types of language arts activities, and of course you're integrating those with various concepts from different content areas, which enables you to integrate your curriculum. Okay, by now you have been exposed to about 12 different types of concept maps and websites that you can explore on your own if you get interested and there's something else that you would like to explore. Certainly you should Google them and see what else you can find for yourselves. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this lesson, concept maps are often linked to constructivist-based teaching. And so for the next 3 slides, we have some general principles of what we mean by constructivism. And the very first part of this slide talks to you again about the concept maps having their origins in constructivism. On the other hand, if you choose to use a concept map with more directed teaching, that would also work too. But the original intent was to have students working individually, in pairs, or in groups to gather information through sensory experiences, through research, through reading references, through sharing ideas with each other, and then organizing it on one of the different concept maps. It's based on the work of Jean Piaget, Lev Vygotsky, Jerome Bruner, Howard Gardner, and Nelson Goodman. And if you want to become more familiar with these particular people, their information about them is very, very easy to find. The main assumption of constructivism is that knowledge doesn't simply exist somewhere out there and must be given to the students. Instead, it is constructed by the students And they learn this knowledge through, as I mentioned before, through their own exploration and sharing of ideas. A primary ingredient of constructivism, and I would also say direct instruction, is that the new knowledge that they're learning must be integrated, must be connected to prior knowledge for it to make any sense to them. Okay, this slide continues with the general principles of constructivism. Also, you have a website that you can go to in order to read more about it in greater detail, and I urge you to do that. Constructivism and direct instruction are the two different philosophies or methods of teaching. Both have a role in the curriculum called comprehensive curriculum, and it depends on the needs of your students and of course on your own philosophy of teaching as to which ones you would emphasize. But I would trust that you are going to do both. Now, again, getting back to constructivism, you're aiming through constructivist methods to have students learn concepts in a very deep way, to develop those deep understandings. You want to move beyond DOK 1 and 2 where they're just learning facts or skills and stopping there. Learning facts or skills in themselves are necessary, but you need for them to go deeper with them once they are learned. Whether they're learned through direct instruction, where you teach them directly and systematically, or whether they gather the facts and skills in the progress of exploring and researching and experimenting on their own, is going to be up to you, the teacher. In constructivism, you provide meaningful, authentic activities to help students construct understanding. This may be difficult sometimes, but if you start thinking in terms of authentic activities, meaning real activities, such as if you're doing a unit on recycling or on biodegradable materials, go out to the playground and actually collect real materials, as opposed to talking about it in the classroom or showing pictures. It's always good, if you can, to use real world or artifacts from the real world in your teaching, and if they have a real purpose for it, that gives them a much more motivational situation where they can actually delve into the learning in a deeper way. In constructivism, collaborative groups should be used, and I've given you the sources of people who have said that in case you want to write some of those down or remember them for your comprehensive exams, where you are required to cite different researchers and different theorists in your exams. You again want to establish explicit links for students between new information taught in class and their past and future experiences. You need to know this because tomorrow you're going to be applying it in this situation. You can, as a constructivist teacher, summarize, review, and link concepts at critical points. That would be you as a facilitator, and having the students put all of their knowledge, organizing their knowledge on concept maps is certainly a good way for them to establish links between all the pieces of information. This is the last slide of this lesson. The next one will be points to ponder, which we will go over. But getting back to constructivism, I wanted to reiterate one point, and that is that typically in a constructivist-based lesson, students are encouraged to work collaboratively or cooperatively together so that they can share ideas, so that they can work together to build knowledge. But sometimes students prefer to work individually, and so as a teacher you should have a mixture of these groupings for your students, and that way you can target the ones that you think work best for your students themselves. Often paired learning works, or paired working together works well, because that way both students have to be active. There's nobody sort of sitting out or dropping out in a group setting. And so consider all the different groupings. Sometimes you can put mixed ability groupings together. Sometimes you can put the same ability groupings together, and you'll come out with different outcomes. And so when you're planning, think about your goals, think about your students and how you want to group them. Now, the last slide on constructivism really tells you some of the same things that we've already discussed, and I urge you to look at these and review some of the learning for yourself. One of the things that teachers, especially science teachers, are very interested in having their students do is for the teacher to identify misconceptions. Students come with a lot of prior knowledge, and oftentimes they have prior knowledge that is not quite accurate. And in order to help them work through their misconceptions, you first have to identify what they are. Second one, you want to challenge the learner's thinking. You want to give them alternative ways to learn. And we've already covered that. They definitely would be thinking at the depth of knowledge levels 3 and 4. And again, you can use concept maps in order to challenge their assumptions of how these concepts are related, because the relationships among concepts and between concepts are something that would be very important for students to explore and learn. So rather than having them learn isolated facts, rather than having them learn a lot of what is perceived to be trivial facts, think about the important facts that you want your students to learn and the various ways that you can deliver them or help your students acquire them in your lessons. All right, the next slide is on points to ponder. All right, the last slide in this lesson contains points to ponder. You have 4 points that you should think about, and that will help you tie together all of the different elements, all of the different concepts that you have learned in Lesson 2. First one is consider the statement, concept maps have their origins in constructivism. How can this be justified? How can you explain that? What about concept maps matches what you know about constructivism? Number 2, concept maps can also be an adjunct to direct instruction, where teachers or authors of written texts directly provide information to be used in the concept map. Is this something that you think would be useful, or would you think it would be more useful for students to gather the information on their own and fill out the map? Think about your own students and which ones might use concept maps in one way, with the freedom of the exploration and constructing their own knowledge, and the students that may need more structured learning through direct instruction. What are the differences and similarities of direct instruction and constructivism? And what difference does the label of direct instruction and constructivism make to your teaching? And then the fourth one is really just sort of an addition to the third one. We are talking about a label, not whether direct instruction or constructivism are effective ways to teach. We know they both have their strengths, and we know they both have their weaknesses. We're not talking about whether one is superior to another. Again, they're just 2 different ways to help you reach your students. So what is your opinion on direct instruction and constructivism? And as we go through the rest of the lessons, you might change your opinion, or you might be able to add to your argument or your ideas that you came up with after this lesson. See you for the next lesson. Bye.